Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm sure you're wondering why you haven't seen the little intro video that I do for my episodes yet. I just wanted to give everyone a heads up that we recorded this interview on Thursday evening with Detective Matt Buffman. It was a fantastic interview. I hope you stick around and watch it. We are also I'll be in chat during the episode, so you have questions, comments, or anything, please feel free to drop a line, and I'll be able to talk with that to you. But this interview is about an hour and 4 minutes long. But before we get into that, I want to thank or let you guys know, join us on our Facebook group, which is the Political Deep Dive Podcast. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter, which is at Papa Duke. On Twitch, we are at DT Valente. Instagram, which doesn't broadcast, but we'll be putting stuff up on there periodically. The Political Deep Dive, and on Mondays, of course, the audio of our episode will be up on SoundCloud at the Political Deep Dive. Again, thank you for the People for Liberty. People for the number 4 liberty.org is their website. They do all kinds of great stuff for the Liberty movement. I recommend everyone go and join that group. They're also on Facebook at People for the number 4 Liberty Inc. So please go ahead and join that organization. You'll get plugged into all kinds of great stuff within the Liberty movement. But without any further ado, I will bring on the episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Again, drop some lines, comments, questions, anything that you want to do in chat in either YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you're watching us from. And I do appreciate you coming on. So, all right, here we go. Hey, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. We're actually recording this interview on Thursday night, so we won't have live feedback on your questions or comments, but please feel free to leave those in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and responding in chat with you guys as this episode airs. But, following on the heels of last week's episode where we were talking with Nicholas Sarwark, about criminal justice reform from perspective of somebody who's a criminal defense attorney, or was a criminal defense attorney, and he still practices law. This week, it's become more prescient that we get the perspective from law enforcement. We've had several high-profile incidents come into play. The incident in Virginia with the Army lieutenant, the incident which actually happened in December. The incident in March where a 13-year-old child was shot in Chicago. The body cam footage was just released today. And then there was an incident, of course, in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, just outside of Minneapolis, where a gentleman 20-year-old was shot by a police officer who thought she was using her taser. So lots of stuff to talk about, but it's not just those incidents. How do we fix law enforcement? How do we address the issues of law enforcement? And with that, I'd like to bring in my guest, Detective Matt Buffman. Detective Buffman, thank you for joining us this evening. I really appreciate you doing that. And let's start with introductions. Go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I like talking and getting out and talking about chosen profession. But outside, so I'm a law enforcement veteran of over 13 years. The past 4 has been a detective. I've worked various assignments such as just general patrol. I did several stints in the sensitive crimes unit, in which we worked on assaults, crimes against children, missing persons. I'm currently investigating non-fatal shootings at this point in time. I at one point in time worked liaised with the state crime lab and was one of the key people in ensuring that all of our sexual assault kits got sent out to the state crime lab and that nothing was left sitting on the shelf, and doing it before there was state laws mandating that. So I've had a nice long career so far. I got like a little over 11 years to go. So
Awesome.
outside of that, just like yourself, I serve on the LNC as one of those privileged alternates to Region 6, where I just get to fill in whenever the time is right to make a couple votes, but otherwise get privy to all the inner workings.
Yep.
I serve as the state chair for at least one more week for the state of Wisconsin Libertarian Party, just like yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of correlations here. I'm married with 3 wonderful young boys, and I'm also an active member in an organization called LEAP, called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, but it's broadened its view and it's now Law Enforcement Action.
Yes.
So yeah, that was a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk about LEAP here in a moment. Tell me what got you into law enforcement as your chosen profession?
I always joke I got married and I needed a job. I was in college. I needed some money, but that's not totally true. I've always honestly been drawn to public service. I knew that was something I want to do. So when I was going through college, I would flip-flop between law enforcement or education. And then it just wound up being law enforcement. That's how I got to where I'm at now.
Fantastic. All right, so let's talk about LEAP. LEAP, as you mentioned, had started out as law enforcement against prohibition. Peruse the website, saw a great video from Peter Christ, I believe his name is, detective in Tonawanda, retired detective in Tonawanda, New York, talking about the drug war. It was quite an impressive interview, talking about all the cons of what we're doing within the drug war. But let's talk a little bit more about, because the mission of it has evolved to the law enforcement action partnership. You've the organization has taken on more things rather than just the drug war. So we're talking about
correct. So I mean, the original thing was the war on drugs, and when I got involved, that's what it was. I had just come off of working street patrol, in which we did a lot of narcotic interdiction, things like that, and I was starting to realize the futility of the entire system. And this was also about the same time that I started really getting into libertarianism and reconcile my career choice and my political and personal philosophy. And that's when I stumbled across LEAP. And originally they were a anti-prohibition organization. And for those that aren't aware, it's an organization filled up with current and former members of law enforcement, current and former prosecutors and defense attorneys, as well as judges, current and former judges, both at the state and federal level. So these are people that have been, they've been involved in the system and they've seen what's wrong with the system. And I think they can offer, a solution that doesn't alienate law enforcement. It doesn't go one way or the other. It is coming from a common sense, practice-based, what they've seen, experience-based, legislation or reform. What they decided to do is do a rebrand to Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and now they're taking where the drug prohibition is still on the forefront, very much so on the forefront. But the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration is a big thing that they are taking on, as well as a few other things. Just the other week, myself and about 109 other members of current and former law enforcement and judges petitioned the Department of Homeland Security and President Biden to to take notice on his immigration policy, to end the collusion between local law enforcement and ICE, to improve the conditions in which people are being held. There's some interesting stats that show that illegal immigrants are like I want to say it was like 40% less likely to report a violent crime because of their fear that they may get deported or lose their family or you name it. So by instituting the immigration policy we have right now, especially where we're having local law enforcement do the job of the federal government, it's just doing a disservice to these people. And that should be regardless of your opinion on the actual immigration issue. These are people, and if they've been, their rights violated, through a crime, they deserve just as much due process and justice as anybody else. It shouldn't the immigration status should not make effect. So we did that. There's another big one. It hasn't come out yet. I signed on to it. I'd be interested to see how many more of our members sign on to it, because this happens to be a sticking point. But ending qualified immunity, not just for law enforcement, for government as a whole. What people don't understand, like why they look at law enforcement as the pot shot, the fish in the barrel when it comes to qualified immunity. But it extends way beyond that. Within your city government, your county government, state and federal, they can do so many things to deprive your rights, like liberty, property, and you have zero legal recourse. It was, so we are going to be petitioning to end qualified immunity for everybody. I doubt that will be well received by either side. The Democrats tend to like ending qualified immunity for law enforcement, but keeping their qualified immunity. Well, Republicans, on the other hand, they just enjoy qualified immunity across the board.
Yeah.
Honestly, it doesn't serve a purpose, in my opinion. I'm probably one of the minority within my career that feel that way. But bad behavior, poor decision making needs to be held accountable, whether it's something I made, a mistake I made, or it's a mistake my best friend made, or it's something I've never made.
So, I mean, that's one of the things. We'll play devil's advocate here, though. One of the things that people say when you are talking about removing qualified immunity, at least on the police officer level, is you're not going to be able to attract quality candidates to be a police officer, or not be able to maintain staffing at the police officer level. What would you say to that?
I would say show me the stats that would back that up. That's all hypothetical and theoretical. That's police union. That's the police union argument, and the big government the Republican argument is that, we're not going to be able to hire anybody because nobody's going to want to get sued. Well, you know what? There's plenty of other professions, whether you're a doctor or whatever, that you get sued all the time, and yet people still want to be doctors. People still want to be nurses. You name it. They're in, and especially in fields like that, their liability, I would say, is on par with the liability that we would come across in law enforcement.
Sure.
So, like I would say, show me the numbers, and like real numbers, not just like, we pulled them and they said that they would quit. Now, more than likely, somebody's not going to quit because they need that job regardless. Exactly. And they'll gripe, but they'll keep doing their job.
So one thing you said that talking about the immigration status, it also reminds me of what happens within the sex worker industry, where a fear of going to jail because you are engaging in sex work means that you don't report crimes like rape, assault, even sexual trafficking when it is happening. That they've, of course, they've lumped everything that is sex work into sexual trafficking, but it does remind me of that's another issue where it's like the Friedman maxim that government wants you to judge their policies based on their intentions rather than the results, and the results are women who are in sex work are far less safe due to our prohibitions.
Yeah.
Immigrants are far less safe because we make them quote unquote illegal.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. And from my time working in the sensitive crimes where I dealt with the prostitution or the sex work community, yeah, that's a rough life to live. And I know most of the professional people I work with were professional, and even when we did deal with somebody from the sex work community, it wasn't just like, well, you're a prostitute, you had that coming. No, it's like, I understand you were doing something legal, but that didn't give that person the right to do what they did. Now let's cut the garbage, just be honest about what's going on, and let's go from there, because we can, at least at the very minimum, we can get arrested. The problem we run into more is, if the case were to get charged, you get somebody in custody, case started, you take that to a jury, unless that jury is from that neighborhood or from that community, they don't understand that. There's a big disconnect between the lifestyle that somebody in the sex work industry is working, as opposed to, the guy out in the suburbs who works at a corporate job and his wife's, a stay-at-home mom. There's a big disconnect there.
Unless that guy from the corporate job frequents the sex work industry. But
well, I'm saying, the lifestyle that they live.
Absolutely. I get what you're saying there, and there are a lot of systemic issues that are on the back end that do need to be addressed when it comes to criminal justice reform, where we stop treating people as criminal and their behavior is criminal when it's consensual, and that will go a long ways to helping that. But another thing that LEAP is involved in is the idea of community policing. And I know that Eugene, Oregon is doing this program where instead of sending out armed officers to every call, they're able to parse it out so that, let's say somebody's having a mental state, they're able to send mental health professionals rather than armed officers. Is that something you'd like to see?
Yeah,
across the board?
And actually, I am working with LEAP. We're just in the beginning stages with trying to get implementing that in Milwaukee, where we're reducing, or at least bringing along a mental health professional or a social worker, whatever the case may be, to somebody who's having a mental health. Unfortunately, very few cops are doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And very few of us, are truly equipped to identify, all right, well, he's having a manic depressive episode, or he suffers from bipolar schizophrenia. They're just, the training and tools aren't there, and the job itself was never meant to do that. Like that, that's the thing. So government likes to fit, the square peg into, or try to fit the square peg into the round hole.
Yes.
And then when everything breaks, they blame the square peg for the problem.
Yeah.
When in fact it's the policy that they've implemented or the lack of resources they provided to their employees that cause the majority of the issues.
Sure. So, we've had a long summer. Part of the reason why I wanted to get into criminal justice and law enforcement reform was that we're going through the trial of Derek Chauvin, and that result's gonna be hitting here probably in the next couple weeks or so.
They're saying next week. Yep.
Next week. So,
yep.
First off, how do you think that trial is going to end up?
I've only seen parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
But my take is that he won't get found guilty of the first-degree murder or of the murder charge itself, just because you have to prove intent and things along those lines. But I would imagine he would, at the very minimum, get convicted for the manslaughter. And I think if that happens, that's not going to sit well with people, regardless. Like, even if it is a guilty verdict, that is not going to sit well, and rightly so. Come on, like that entire thing, looking at it from, I don't care what profession you're in, you knew what was going on was not right. and once you learn more, you knew it was wrong. Because I can tell you how many times I can tell you about times that I've had combative people, and never once did we do that. When I had a combative person, we got them inside of a squad guard as soon as we could, because then they're no longer a danger to the public, and you don't have to
Yep.
fight with them or wrestle with them. Like whatever was going on there, just it boggles my mind, and I don't think there's an excuse in the world for what went on.
Yeah, I saw something today with that the defense was trying to blame the fact that he was by the car exhaust pipe and that's what killed him. I'm like, that's reaching, man. Come on.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, and yeah, and that's the thing. So like most of the time, most people aren't privy to the world of like a lot of these trials, but it doesn't just have to be, a murder trial to do
mhm.
victim blaming. It occurs all over the place, and some of the stuff you hear is just like it's just off.
Yeah.
It's a form of victim blaming.
Plus, it's
In
just
hope,
trying to sow seeds
yeah,
of doubt.
it's off deflection.
Yeah, they're trying to sow seeds of doubt in the jury.
Yeah.
I thought that was rather ineffective, but who knows? Who knows what the jury sees? So,
Well, and
um,
that's the thing. They can try it. I'll tell you right now, there's going to be one of two ways. Either one, they're going to be receptive to it, or two, it's going to backfire immensely, and they're going to be really pissed off at that defense attorney for assuming that they're that stupid enough to believe whatever he's trying to pitch. I'm
yeah,
serious. I've seen it happen in court before.
yeah, exactly.
And
So,
you can always see on their faces the exact moment that happens. And you're like, and you look over at the defense, you're like, dude, you just messed up, man.
so, out of the stuff that happened this summer, there was a call to defund the police. What does that mean to you?
I've heard a lot of different things. I guess it depends on who it's coming from. For some people, it is a straight up ending of law enforcement in their community.
Mhm.
For others, it's cutting back on resources. For me personally, we've seen cutbacks in our IT funding, training funding, upcoming academy classes. That's where we've seen budget cuts in that area. And, I'm in a Class A city where unfortunately, is a high crime city that
Mhm.
we can't, some things we can't afford to be cutting. Um, you know, and honestly, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and I'm just, hey, I'm just the employee. I gotta live and bear with it and keep doing my job. That's kind of how I look at it.
Some of the things I heard were not the idea that you're going to completely remove police. It's the reallocation of resources to that more community based type organization where you're employing more varied professions within law enforcement that can deal with things like mental health issues or sexual crimes or things
Yeah,
like that that's more
and
specialized and actually deals with
in
real.
certain areas, we are already doing that. For example, when I was at Sensitive Crimes, we actually shared the building with what is called the Sojourner Truth Family Peace Center, which is a women's shelter.
Mhm.
We also shared that building with the district attorneys that worked on domestic violence. We shared that building with the Children's Hospital, as well as what else? It was a women's shelter. There were quite a few. It was like a multi-jurisdictional, like collaborative.
Yeah,
For the most part, we tried to work together as best as possible. We had victim advocates that, when some stuff that kind of probably didn't require the touch of a detective, more a touch of somebody, a social worker. They would go out and meet with the victim, or see if they need anything. So, in certain aspects, we have been doing that. Um, I just it's kind of just such a hodgepodge across the board. Every
sure.
different city is going to have a different view on that. And then the hope is that whoever they're collaborating with is up to the task. That's what it comes down to. Otherwise, you're just, you're creating a failed program, and things are going to go right back to the way they were before, and will resolve nothing.
Sure. So let's go back to the drug war. I think one of the things with the drug war that's happened with the drug war is that it really has driven a wedge between the community and the police department. That there's so many perverse incentives in what we've done with the drug war, whether it's civil asset forfeiture or any of those things, that it's almost irreparably damaged that relationship, where community that it serves doesn't want to interact with the police to be able to deal with the crimes because uh, it becomes, I could lose my house or I could lose this or that. Um, t- Tell me what, what should we do with the drug war at this point? I mean,
But in my personal as well as like my work at LEAP and the Libertarian
Mhm.
Party, decriminalization and legalization is the only logical path forward, in my opinion. And I'm not talking just about marijuana. I'm talking we take things. You look at like the Portugal Project,
Mhm.
and what they did there, where they dramatically reduced once they decriminalized the HIV rates because they had the highest HIV rates in Europe.
Yep.
Property crime went down to nil. Their prison system was not taxing, their citizens to death. Um,
Sure.
like you have to treat drug addiction for what it really is. Even though it's self-inflicted, it is still a medical issue. It's a medical issue, and no amount of me locking somebody up in a cage is going to fix the fact that they're still going to want to use heroin, or they're still going to want to use X, Y, or Z drug. Especially when there's nothing there on the back end to teach them or help them cope. And
Yeah.
find other outlets outside of that. We just the restorative justice, we've failed immensely on restorative justice when it comes to the war on drugs, and it's embarrassing. It really is. We as Americans shouldn't be embarrassed over it. And on top of it, it is a regressive and racist and classist set of laws, just like gun laws.
Mhm.
Poor and the marginalized communities that get the short end of the stick on this because they can't afford to hire good lawyers. They haven't been educated in how to deal with the law. So what do? They go in there and they get a public defender because they can't afford an attorney whose caseload is gigantic. And they just go, hey, we can cut you a deal. You'll do probation, but guess what? Now you're a felon.
Yep.
Now you're not going to be able to work, or it's going to take forever because we've there are a couple great groups on the expungement, but like that's a process unto itself too. So I mean, like you're just in all honesty, you are destroying generations upon generations of the people who need it. Need help the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
That they
You're
don't get
kicking
put
people
down
while they're down.
anymore. They've already started where they started. They deserve to have every advantage that anybody else does. But the war on drugs or the war on guns, not allowing for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big thing that's going to be coming up soon. Is with the war on drugs, the war on guns, well, especially the guns, that that they're making more push for that. That we're going to see more confrontations in the neighborhood to be able to that to enforce those laws.
Yeah, and I mean I shudder to think if and when that does come, what my job is going to look like. I do, like, that scares me, and I know I'm not the only one because there are plenty of other Second Amendment loving law enforcement officers that have expressed the same sentiment. Like, are they going to try and force us to go, enforce red flag laws, or all of a sudden now the 12-round clips are illegal, and now we have to go arrest a person who is not a felon before, but now sudden one swipe of a pen and now they're a felon. Like that,
Yeah.
that is an actual concern that we all have, and I guess we'll each have to grapple with. I know where I stand on that, but you know,
Sure.
uh, it's it's a crazy evolving world right now.
It is, and it seems like so. I mean, one of the things that we had this last couple of weeks is Senator Tom Cotton said that we are under incarcerating uh, in America. That we're not putting enough people in jail. Now, again, we are 5% of the world's population, and we're like 20 to 25% of the world's prison population. I don't know that this is an issue of under incarcerating people. Um, will more prisons and more prisoners solve any of our law enforcement issues?
No, no, especially when you talk about the things like restorative justice, where you're making somebody whole. Yeah, okay, maybe they did do something wrong, they go to jail, but while they're in jail, they get therapy or they get
Yeah.
access to all the education. That stuff's not happening. Jail in itself has become a for-profit business.
Hmm.
So it behooves, you know, um, private prisons to give people like Senator Cotton some campaign money, and it behooves him to keep voting terrible laws that put more and more, make more and more people criminals that maybe weren't criminals before,
Yeah.
or harshes sentences on those that are already criminals. That is one of, and honestly, that's one of the biggest lobbies out there right now is the private prison lobby, and they hold considerable power, much like the lobbies for military bases in the United States. Like, God
Hmm.
forbid you want to be a congressman and shut down a military
Right.
base in your
Yeah.
district. That's suicide right there.
Yeah.
So like the prison industry, and then that's what I mean. You have to call it what it is. It's an industry.
Yeah.
Um, it's not.
Even
It's not. It's
even
not
the
built for any other purpose.
but even the public prison guard industry is uh, has, well, at least the prison guard unions with the public side have been very vocal and politically active when it comes to things like decriminalization in California and other states where that's up for a public vote. They tend to give a ton of money to the no campaigns on those things. Um,
Well, there's the fear that because they get brought in with the fear that you're going to lose your job. What
yeah,
are you going to do? I would say, like, at least on the law enforcement, you decriminalize or you legalize. I got 15 other much more high pressing crimes that I could be investigating, whether burglaries, stolen cars, homicides, you name it, like real crimes with real victims.
yes,
And it should be dedicating a large more, almost all of our resources when it comes to the investigative aspect. On the other hand, you start coming back on prison population, they might have to cut a few people. But my understanding is that they can't find enough people to work in those prisons, and people are working,
oh yeah,
12-hour days for 12 days in a row, So,
yep. Okay, sorry, got lost there for a second. Uh, so a bill in California would professionalize the police, and this is kind of going across the country, where it's starting to require a college degree, particularly in the criminal justice field, to then go into law enforcement. So it's basically adding a 4-year degree onto anything else that you would consider like, just the basic training for, state police or local police. What are your feelings on that?
slightly conflicted. I mean, I have a 4-year degree in criminal justice. I also went to school for history before that. And our department does not require you have that right away. They give you a certain amount of time to get X amount of credits. But I can tell you, I've met the best cops that only have an associate's, and I've met cops that have criminal justice degrees that have no business being cops. It's like I don't know if it particularly as a direct benefit. On top of that, you see all the for-profit universities, which is they target the public sector jobs quite a lot.
Yeah.
So I mean, what quality of education are you actually getting? And that's what concerns me. Not to say that there shouldn't be, and you know, obviously there should be some type of education requirement, but to automatically assume that just because you went and got a 4-year degree um, makes you more eligible than somebody else. I just don't know. And then, from my experience, the classes they teach, I mean, had almost zero application to real life,
Sure.
the real life.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the other side, then, what about current police training? Just the basic, I want to be a cop. I go register at City Hall, get a job, and they send me to training for, a period of time, like 6 weeks or so.
Yeah. So I went through a 24-week academy.
Okay. I know
Through,
that
through
it
and,
varies by state. Like some
yeah,
states are,
yeah, state and jurisdiction. Some are 16, at least here in Wisconsin. I want to say the state patrol does like a 27-week one.
yeah.
Um, but I think ours was, they bumped ours up. I think we were one of the first classes where they bumped it up from like 21 to 24 weeks.
Okay.
So
But do you think that's adequate for putting somebody on the streets as a first time officer?
it's hard to say. Some people probably require a little bit more. I'm under the impression, or from the experience, that most of what you learn and figure out of who you are comes from actually working on the street and being general application. It can tell you all this stuff in a classroom,
Yeah.
but does it actually apply out there? Can you apply it out there? Are you able to apply it out there? Some of it does not apply. Some of it, they do it because the state requires them to.
Well, I
It
know
doesn't
in New Mexico there was a very famous class that they were teaching at the state police academy. It was called Killology, and it was basically how to, it wasn't like how to kill and get away with it. It was like, you
have.
know, basically treat every moment that you are a police officer like you're about to die, and
Yes,
how to rapidly react to, and
I think that's a terrible way. And man, you got to be taking years off your life if that's what you're thinking about. And that's not just localized to that department in New Mexico.
mm,
It's always about, you got to make sure you can get home safe at night. You always got to be watching your back. Like to live your life like that, almost in fear, 24/7. That anybody and everybody looking to get one over on you, and you should never turn your back. Like you know
I mean, do you
that.
feel that that kind of feeds the culture that has led
Yeah,
to
I mean,
more
the us
police
versus,
shooting?
it creates an us versus them mentality, 100%. And I've never subscribed to that. Like,
Yeah,
it's, yeah, I've always tried to treat each person on their own merits. And obviously, if something, a situation arises where it piques my interest, then maybe I'll be a little bit more vigilant, but I also don't go walking in, letting my guard down completely, but I don't just automatically assume this person might kill me. This person might hurt my partner or something.
sure.
It's just, I think, like I said, you got to be taking years off your life for stress on that.
So let's talk about weapons then. Lots been made of the NDAA 1033 program, where you know s- uh, local jurisdictions have been fed military surplus equipment, whether it's Bearcats or MRAPs, or actual weapons. And if you looked at the situation that happened this summer in various cities, you looked at the police and they look like an invading force. Do you think that that's contributed to the idea that us versus them ideology?
It definitely hasn't helped. Yeah. It definitely hasn't helped. What is it? Yeah. What is the perception that it puts out there? That our
Yeah,
police department is now rolling around in vehicles that can withstand, IEDs or direct explosive attacks. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't help. Like, I guess from my department, we don't break things like that out very often. Like,
mhm,
unless it's for like barricaded, like the SWAT teams going in to do that. But there are other departments that I've seen on that, you know, missing person. So what do? I mean, every toy that they've ever bought from the U.S. government is now coming out, and they're searching yards with M16s and X, Y, and Z. I'm like, that's the last thing I want to see looking out my backyard. It's
Yeah.
definitely not creating friends, and it
No.
does a divide, and it also gives it provides that mentality, that we are a military force as opposed to a peacekeeping, law enforcement agency meant
Yeah.
for.
One of the things I've always said that, if I was going to redraw how policing works is that it almost treat it like the fire department. Like, come when called. Don't go looking for crimes. I mean, I think that's where we've gotten to the point where we have too many confrontations between the police and the citizens that they serve. Is that we're they're actively looking for us to mess up, and that's where you get things like, oh, your tag is not in the proper place in the window, or you got a busted tail light, or you got something that runs afoul of some minor infraction within the law code that then creates a greater when we come to things like mandatory minimums and three strike laws, where people are afraid for their future just from a police stop, that it then becomes an escalated police stop that results in
Yeah, you would be correct. The ending of the proactive, at least for the most part, the proactive nature of law enforcement, especially when it comes down to like just straight up traffic enforcement or drug interdiction, or gun interdiction, like that's caused just countless amounts of problems. For the longest time, if you wanted to get somewhere in a police department, you better arrest somebody for drugs. You better arrest somebody for a gun. Now, if you go and arrest a guy who did 15 burglaries, they may say, "Hey, great job," but you're
yeah.
not going to promote it. That's not the same as the ounce of marijuana, which in the grand scheme that's trivial, or
Mhm.
the 1950s revolver that they had that's duct taped together. Ooh, big bust right there. And I've seen
Yeah.
it before. Like, then that's like,
The big display table, yeah.
yeah, big display table, like that's the attaboy. That's like, ooh, that guy, he knows what he's doing. He's going out getting guns and drugs. Well, the one guy who's using, evidence-based policing, whether it be from crime stats or fingerprints or DNA, and going out and getting a guy who has done multiple burglaries. And if anybody's aware, burglaries are the number one driver in the reduction of property tax and the exodus of people from a community. People do not feel safe in their homes at all once they're burglarized. Like, that's the game over right there. They are going to the rates of them moving out just astronomical. So that's what you should happen right there. The burglaries or the armed robbery or the shooting, or actual crime.
Sure.
Instead, it's the reward for this perceived, like, ooh, he's you know, guns and drugs are in the blood for him. Like,
Yeah.
he's just he's moto. So
Okay. So let's talk about schools. We in the last 25 years, we've really started putting a greater police presence in schools. And now we're starting to see a rise of a phenomenon called the school to prison pipeline. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you think that perhaps we've gone overboard as far as, the things that, I will tell you, when I was a kid in high school, the stuff that they're zero tolerance for now, I would have been in jail. Amazingly, that, like, I did not, the school resource officer at that time didn't do anything to me, but
yeah, I mean,
everything is
you could,
trivial now.
yeah. I mean, the school, the prison. A lot of people look at just the perception of having law enforcement in school sets this tone. You're not there to learn anymore. You're just there that, like, this is mini prison. That's
Mhm.
all it is. And so there are a lot of places, including in Milwaukee, where they said, we don't want cops at our school anymore. They'll just handle, and they got a lot of things to handle, but they'll handle it as, on case by case basis. You're trying to end that. Um, and the other thing too is, like, when law enforcement was in those schools, it was they were constantly being harangued for anything and everything, like, oh,
Yeah.
arrest them, kick them out, do this, do that. I mean, so I mean, what kind of relationship is that really building? It's not. It's building a negative relationship. That, why would you possibly want to go to school when you run the risk of being arrested just because you talk back to your teacher, or you know
You drew a
some
gun.
other minute thing, or truancy, being chased after for truancy.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, they're zero tolerance for things like the kid drew a gun or he ate a gun out of his Pop Tart, like he bit his Pop Tart
oh,
and it looked
sure,
like a
yeah,
gun, and there's zero
yeah,
tolerance for that stuff,
yeah.
and that's
They did,
suspendable and removable from the school grounds.
yeah.
And they find that when things like that happen, it's about a year. They look at those kids within a year. They're either in the juvenile justice system or actually in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you're going to start making, I say, unemployable felons
Hmm.
before they even have a chance.
Yeah, and criminals where there really isn't. What is the crime of drawing a
Well,
gun?
I guess it would depend on the jurisdiction. I mean, they could do
Yeah,
disorderly conduct, but that's the thing, is it's going to follow you for the rest of your life.
yeah,
Like,
which is ridiculous.
when a job does a background check on you, they're gonna ask that question unless it
Sure.
gets expunged, and you're gonna have to explain it, and places are gonna be like, well, we can't have that. So I shouldn't say not all places, but there will be plenty of businesses that will not want to hire you because of some stupid mistake you made when you were a kid. That shouldn't, have resulted the way it was. I had a sit down yesterday, and I think you might enjoy this. And I cannot recall his name offhand, but he runs a nonprofit, and they're all about restorative justice. And restorative justice and he wanted to get my viewpoint coming from the law enforcement field, um, of, let's say somebody commits a misdemeanor, they steal your car, or they stole something out of your car, or they damage your property, as opposed to, police come in contact with them, and as opposed to sending them to jail, they set up a mediation where they sit down with you, who are the victim, and a mediator, and you guys get to talk this out, so you get a better understanding of how messed up their life is, and
Hmm.
then they can put a face to the crime they actually committed and find out how it really affected you. And I think it was like the Longmont Project, I think, is what it is, like one of
Okay.
the pilot programs, and they found in like 80% of these cases, the offender went through the entire program and did not reoffend afterwards. Like, so just remediation, that's not going to jail. That's, not putting a felony on somebody's record, or a criminal case on somebody's record. And I think that's pretty amazing right there.
Hmm.
I know there is, like, obviously you're not going to do it for a homicide or sexual assault, but for the lesser crimes, that that way, because it is, you got to look at it too, like, for the person who's been arrested, they look at the criminal justice system. They, especially in a big city, they meet with their public defender once or twice. That's it. So
Yeah.
it's just a face. The judge is just the face. The DA is just the face. Cops are just the face. It's this big faceless system. But I'll tell you right now, it's the same exact thing for the victims. They get it, hour or two with law enforcement during the initial investigation. They get a 15-minute sit down with the DA, who the DA goes, yeah, I'm going to charge a case, not going to charge a case. And then they don't hear anything else until they get a subpoena. So it's another faceless system. So what does a program like restorative justice do, or mediation? It brings people together, and it starts putting a face to what actually happened. And I found that, using your verbal skills to get whether to get compliance or to get the information you're looking for, is always preferable to any other route. And I would say the
Yeah.
same thing in there, where if you were to sit down and, you could talk to the person who violated your house or stole your car, and maybe get an understanding. Maybe you can still be mad, but you could at least get an understanding of the shoes they're walking in, just like they get understanding of the shoes you're walking. And I think that's at least an admirable way of approaching that.
Yeah, I think that kind of collaborative justice. I think there are a whole host of reforms that we could do within the once they're arrested, to the point that the case itself is resolved, and even into prison, if that's the option that is done eventually. There's so many reforms that we can take from other countries that are doing it far better than we are right now, just based on the recidivism numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So
the problem is there's so much money tied up in politically tied up into whether it's law enforcement or the prison system or some of the other, you think about all the companies that make the beds for the prison, or like it just goes expounds.
Yeah, and there's a lot of political capital built into the idea of being tough on crime.
Yep.
And the worst thing a politician, it seems to be, is that they're seen as soft on crime. That association then makes them the reason why your friend got robbed or you got robbed or whatever. It seems like a perverse system where we're not going to look for a solution because we're politically afraid to make that leap. So there have been several high-profile incidents. They didn't happen this week per se, but they've happened over the last few months, and they've come to light this week. So this week we had the first one was actually the one that did happen this week, which was the shooting of the gentleman in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. The officer, Kim Potter, says that she mistook her service weapon for a taser. How likely is that to happen?
It shouldn't, but in the heat, I guess I haven't watched the footage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can tell you that in the heat of the moment, people do, that adrenaline kicks, but nonetheless, you're supposed to, at least in my understanding. I've never had a taser. They never issued me one. But my understanding is taser is offhand, firearm is dominant hand. And the reason that is if you deploy a taser, it doesn't work, you can drop it and then transition into, something else. Your dominant hand's still there to transition to the next, step in the use of force continuum. Yeah, you don't put your taser on the same side as your gun.
Yeah.
Because this isn't the first time this has happened. This happened out in Oakland.
Yeah, Oscar Grant.
Yeah, 5-6 years ago, where
it's like almost 10 years
straight
ago.
up executed that guy in the metro out there. And it was the same thing, except for I want to say he had his taser next to his gun. Why he was doing that is just that just popped in my mind. And here's what I'll say: like, knowing what I know about what happened, she deserves to be criminally charged. But this is just a highlight of government work in general and how negligent and underqualified and just that a lot of government could be, or they are just government in general is. Like this is just an embodiment of the failures from top to bottom within that department and probably within that city and within that state, that just where.
And she wasn't a rookie cop either. I mean, she's been.
No, I want to say she resigned before, and so I want to say she had 25 or 26 years on, and so she'll get her pension at this point in time because she didn't get fired. She'll get criminally charged, but she'll still be pension eligible.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, that incident is extremely sad, and I don't know what was going through her mind, but I'm sure she will be charged and probably face some type of jail time regarding that.
I mean, I'm expecting I wasn't mad at the charge that they made. It sounds like it kind of fits what happened there. I expect that one to she'll probably get to the second-degree manslaughter, but she'll probably plead down a very light sentence.
Yeah, my understanding is that when she fired the gun, and this would add to her defense, is she did say taser, 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 which is a common command when
Yep.
an officer does deploy their taser. So, but
Is-
again, like why tasers are offhand, firearms are dominant.
well, so somebody is driving a vehicle and they're driving off. How smart is it to hit somebody either with a bullet or a taser? Like it can
Well, they're driving.
incapacitate them and then turns
Probably
that
not very
into
smart. I guess you would have, if you're talking taser, you wouldn't be doing it, at
yeah.
least in my experience. You know, discharging a firearm, you would have to look at the totality of the circumstances, what type of risk they pose to you and pose to themselves and pose to public, you know, and then, but even then, you know, it has to be pretty stringent. Like they're trying to run somebody over as they're driving away. You know,
Yeah.
you don't just shoot a car because it drove away.
Yeah. So I
You
mean
know.
that might factor into the decision that he was driving away, but he wasn't trying to hit somebody. But then shooting him caused him to get into an accident further down the road. So
Yeah.
it's like you had all the information on this guy. You could have gone and got him later. I don't know why you fired at him, but the other incident, the second incident that happened earlier this week it actually happened in December. Army lieutenant was driving in Virginia, was pulled over for not failing to display his car tag. I guess the window tint was a little too dark for his vehicle, and they couldn't see it in the window. In that incident, did you take a look at that video?
I saw briefly. I didn't get the full context other than he was stopped over and the officer was not very professional with his dealings with him.
Yeah, that was not professional at all. I mean, you're pointing a gun at a guy, and I've actually done this where, and I did it actually more for the officer safety. Was I was speeding, a cop pulled me, threw his lights on behind me, and I was like a block from a major shopping center. So I indicated that I'm going down this way and turning.
Sure.
And to get him out of the roadway, because you don't want this guy standing in the middle of the road trying to issue me a ticket or anything like that. He went to a well-lit gas station. Like what is it wasn't like he accelerated to get out, get away from the ticket. He drove calmly to a gas station and then parked. Why come out and tell the guy that he's going to ride the lightning and he should be afraid about getting it out of his car?
I wish I could tell you what was wrong with that officer, but unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, we all have bad days.
There are people in. Where did you say that was at?
That was in. I can't remember the name of the town in Virginia, but it's a
Virginia. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that wouldn't fly anymore where I'm at. And in fact, they've made it so for example, I put hands on somebody to take them into custody or decentralize them, or we get into a fight, we have to call for a supervisor for a use of force. They've now made it a use of force just to draw your pistol on somebody.
Oh wow. Okay.
So you have to explain, this is why I drew my pistol. Other places don't do that, and it's just carte blanche. If you're pointing the name at and a lot of times I think it's perceived as a form of trying to gain compliance.
Yeah, well, that's a bad way to gain compliance because
exactly.
You can always squeeze that trigger, and then now you're in a whole world of hurt.
Yeah.
And then
just like in Milwaukee, we also were ahead of our time where we severed ties with ICE, and we no longer do anything with them at all. So part of that was because we fell into an ACLU agreement and to avoid lawsuits and things like that. We've changed a lot of what we're doing when it comes to body cameras, squad cameras, being a more transparent department. So like anytime you come in contact with somebody, you are giving them a card with your phone number on it, your supervisor's number, internal affairs number, like all sorts of things. Like you're not leaving anything to caution anymore. So like there are positive things, if that's that are happening in certain places. It took a lawsuit in order for those things to happen. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
We weren't cognizant enough to do that on our own and realize that, you know, maybe what we're doing isn't the right thing, or as well intentioned as it is, it's not the right thing.
Yeah. And then the final incident, I actually haven't even had a chance to look at this video yet, but apparently in Chicago, the last month, a young 13-year-old was shot by Chicago police. And apparently the body cam footage shows him with his arms in the air. That's just not going to, I mean, it's going to make a fairly tense situation already over the Minneapolis situation, even worse, I think. So I'm hoping that we get some, the mayor came out and said, don't judge it on the video, which, it's hard to. I mean, like you see, if somebody's got their hands up, yeah, even if they weren't complying to begin with, but they are complying now, you shouldn't be shooting them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, just when we start to like kind of think we're in the clear or something like this happens,
yeah,
everything, and that's why, and honestly, that's why I'm proud to be a member of LEAP, because everybody always goes, especially within our circles, there are all cops are bastards, there are no good cops, but guess what? There are good cops. We
yes.
aren't doing actual work. We're lobbying, we're petitioning, we're fighting the good fight, trying to change a profession that serves you,
Yes.
in a respectful, constitutional way, but it just that does that sell newspapers or make CNN? No. What makes CNN is the bad all the bad stuff that happens.
Oh, look at the business on fire now, all that crap.
Yeah.
But
there are plenty of us out there that want to do the right thing, aren't doing the right thing. And why don't you call up the bad cops? I go, what do you think I do every day at work? I make fun of the people who are terrible.
That's awesome. And that's why I was very happy to bring you on tonight. Looks like we've come to the end of our hour, and I really appreciate you coming on tonight and talking to us about law enforcement reform and some of the issues that are going on. We probably could have gone a couple hours on this one, but I really appreciate you coming on. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, not really. I guess if anybody's interested, I will be visiting some of my region's state conventions. I'll be in Iowa this weekend, repping the Pragmatist Caucus. I'll be tabling for them. And then I will be doing my final chairing my final business meeting for the Libertarian Party of Wisconsin the following weekend up in Eau Claire. And we got a great lineup of speakers. We got Joe Bishop Henchman, we got Joe Jorgensen, we got Spike Cohen, we got Adam Kokesh. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting somebody too. We got a really good Karen Carlos is going to be there. John Phillips is going to be there. Like you name the who's who from the national stage is going to be at our convention.
Except for me.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, man.
I know. I'm going to be probably still suffering conference crash. By the time this airs, I will have taken my last gavel as chair of West Virginia. So
it's going to be a good feeling, I think, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm going to get home and I'm going to
move on to work on the national stuff and the ballot access and
platform or bylaws and affiliate support and IS and all kinds of stuff. So yeah.
But no, I enjoy it, and I thank you so much. I've watched some of your stuff before, and it's always entertaining. And hopefully, we're offering, kind of a look. What I wanted out of this was just the people, to put a face to it, a libertarian face to law enforcement, and know that there are decent people out there trying to do the right thing and trying to make change too. Not just saying I want to change something, but actually doing some of the things to make the change, and then hopefully one day we'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for fighting the good fight, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on the LNC and everyone who are watching when this airs on Sunday. Feel free to join me on Facebook. It's the Political Deep Dive Podcast, all one word. On Twitter, it is Papaduke. Where else? YouTube, Papaduke as well. On Instagram, it's the Political Deep Dive. And Monday morning, we'll be putting this audio up on SoundCloud for you to take on your favorite podcast software. So, Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us this week, and we will talk to you next Sunday night. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. We air every Sunday night at 8 p.m. on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. Thanks to People for Liberty for airing this episode on their Facebook page at People4Liberty Inc. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter with the handle of Papaduke, P-A-P-A-D-U-K-E. Our Facebook page is the Political Deep Dive Podcast, all one word. Our Twitch handle is DTValente, DTVALENTE, and our SoundCloud is The Political Deep Dive, all one word. We will see you next Sunday night at 8 p.m.